I also want to recognize the stellar work of Robin Williams, who came on board to guide and contribute with her many years of experience in the labor movement and all the branches and youth councils and college units of the NAACP of the state of Maryland. And a special recognition of our President Emeritus, Gerald Stansberry, who kind of enlivened this, and along with Second Vice President Jackie Alsop, who's on this call. Hey, look, we're in the middle of a COVID. We're in the middle of the aftermath of a conscious uprising that triggered a national embrace of the fact that health disparities exist in the African-American community, that health disparities exist in the African-American community. These disparities are caused in part by significant pitfalls of social determinants in our communities. And in a nutshell, broken systems cause broken families and broken communities. Broken systems cause broken families and broken communities, and they influence sickness and death. Our work is about exposing those facts, but also turning the corner on the reality that Black African people are being recorded for how we die at this time in American history, whether it's the horror of a Metro bus driver in Baltimore City being killed by gunshot, or the many other lives taken over this past weekend for reasons that we can't explain. We can't bring any of those residents back. But what we can do is focus on systems that make our cities and counties work in such a way that cause premature death. While heart disease is the #1 cause of death in this country, sickness and death due to cancer caused by tobacco consumption is not far behind. Preventable deaths due to smoking and secondhand smoke can be explained and can be mitigated. So our goal in this process is not just to highlight the disparities that are obvious, but to continue a real grassroots conversation about how we get families to understand where the rubber meets the road and how the broken systems that influence what may appear to be common habits are designed for-profit business schemes planned by big tobacco and other forces outside of our communities. The NAACP's work in this space gives us a chance to be health leaders in communities and not just to explain preemption in a culturally competent way, but to encourage our families, communities, and leaders to know that these broken systems guided the dependency and addiction of tobacco, and we must heal our families and communities with awareness, advocacy, action, and we need all hands on deck. So happy to get this started on Black History Day, the first day of Black History Month, and let's get to work. I hope I had
Andy, you're on mute.
Hope I had the sound on.
Thank you. Thank you very much, President Flowers. Appreciate your presentation and appreciate the partnership that we've built. Some of you may recognize this slide from last time. Jackie spoke about this a little bit. Last training 2 years ago, Local Maryland launched. And again, local stands for Let Our Communities Act Locally. It's a coalition of organizations throughout the state that's working to make sure that our communities can do exactly that, act locally, and that when this, and at times the state wants to make decisions for our localities, and sometimes that's just not right. And we launched 2 years ago at our press conference, and President Stansberry spoke and was really, really terrific, had terrific messaging. As you can see right there, Maryland State Conference of the NAACP finds preemption both offensive and harmful to people of color. That really raised a few eyebrows. And what we did that first session that, in 2019 is that we made sure that the Maryland minimum wage bill passed without preemption amendments, meaning there was no special amendment saying that the fight for $15 that said, well, no, that's not true in Calvert County or Baltimore City. We made sure that each of our communities could act locally, and then it was $15 for everybody. I'm sorry. What that did was it allowed them to make their own decisions, so that $15 was the floor and not necessarily the ceiling. So then it could still be $17 in one place or another, or $18 in one place or another. So that was a, like I said, there's many groups involved in local Maryland, but the primary groups involved in that specifically were both the NAACP and the American Heart Association. And that partnership continues today with this campaign, Maryland Local Tax Control Bill, Maryland Local Tobacco Control Bill. And I'd like to introduce Laura Hale. Laura is the Maryland State Government Relations Director for the American Heart Association. She's going to talk a little bit about AHA's involvement and exactly what the bill is all about.
Wonderful. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining tonight. I'm really excited for our efforts as we continue to push forward the Maryland's Local Tobacco Control Bill. What this legislation does, as Senate Bill 410 with our wonderful bill sponsor, Senator Kramer, is that it restores the ability for our cities and counties to fight back against big tobacco. We talked during our trainings about how prior to 2009 and the Altatus court case, cities and counties in the state of Maryland could fight big tobacco. They passed important policies like clean indoor air. It's why we have a statewide law now, is because of cities and counties pushing forward this kinds of legislation. And it was exactly, and now because of the court case, our cities and counties can. And so we need the state to clarify our cities and counties can go further and can go above the state and fight this fight. And so really looking forward to your efforts. And as we work towards this, we've got a bill hearing on February the 11th, but we know that this is going to be a long-term push to be able to get this. Big tobacco doesn't want us to be able to fight them in cities and counties. They only want to fight one place, and that's the state level. Preferably, they'd frankly rather fight federally because they don't like having to split their energy across the jurisdictions. But we know we need to keep that fight local. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And if anybody is interested in contacting Laura directly, her information's right there, laura.hale@heart.org and 336-480-4029. So this is truly a team effort, really, with, like I said, lots and lots of organizations, but primarily the ones on this call are our American Heart Association, local Maryland, and of course, NAACP. I'd now like to introduce Horizon Foundation's Carrie Dara. Carrie is a communications officer and is a terrific partner with both Sugar Free Kids Maryland and Local Maryland. And she's going to talk a little bit about Messaging 101. What is a message and how do we use it? So let me throw it over to Carrie right now.
All right, thanks, Andy. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Carrie Dara, and I'm the communications officer for the Horizon Foundation. If you don't know, Horizon is Howard County's community health foundation and the largest independent health philanthropy in the state of Maryland. And we are also a partner in the Local Maryland Coalition. So I'm here to just very briefly go over some general basics on what messaging is, why it's important, before we get into specifics about preemption and this bill. Some of you might already be familiar with some of this, so just bear with me, but we thought it would be worthwhile to quickly go over the basics for folks who may be new to this area. So basically, what is messaging? And the most basic definition is it's how you communicate about a topic or an organization. It's how you are demonstrating something of value to whatever target audience you're trying to reach. And messaging is important because it stands as the basis or blueprint for all of your other communications. So your press releases, your social media posts, content for fact sheets or other materials, your website content, advertising copy. It all starts with crafting your messaging. Andy, you want to move over to the next slide? Thanks. All right, so messaging, when you think about it, it starts with the 3 C's when you're talking about crafting a message. You want it to be clear, concise, and compelling. You want your audience to be able to easily understand the topic. You want to get to the point as quickly as you can because we all know human beings have a very short attention span. And you also want it to be persuasive so people support your argument and what you're trying to do. And in advocacy campaigns in particular, messaging is important because it articulates a call to action. It should tell people why should they care about your cause. And that's really necessary to build support for your issue. Another thing is that it's really important to have a clear and concise message for your organization, or in particular your spokespeople, to operate from a consistent basis and have a common understanding of what your message is. Next slide. So I wanted to share just one example of what we call a message box or a message wheel. There are certainly other models or variations of this that exist. So you might see other structures in messaging documents, depending on what you're working on. But I work with this model a lot. It's pretty easy to use and follow. It has 4 main boxes: your problem, your solution, your action, and your vision. And it's easy to start the conversation in any one of these boxes based on questions you might get for people and work your way around. And if you have nothing else, these top line messages in each of these boxes will enable you to tell folks just the gist of your argument. Basically forms what would be your elevator speech, what you're working on, and why people should care. So pretty self-explanatory, but your problem is basically what is the issue at hand, your solution, what is needed to address that issue. Your action is what do you want people to do about it? So pass this bill, call your legislator. This is the area where you'd have a lot of that type of language. And then your vision. What is the future that you're trying to build? What do you want to see as a result of all these actions? So these would be your top line messages. You would have supporting points under all of them. So you won't just have these 4 boxes. And it's an easy way for you to organize all your different statistics, facts, other supporting arguments that you might have. But these are the top line messages when you think about structuring your argument. Next slide. And that is me. So yeah, feel free to contact me if you have any questions. Keep in touch with the Horizon Foundation, and thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you very much, Carrie. I'll give everybody a minute if they need to write down any of that information. Your fun social media handles, Charles, very similar. And I am quite familiar because I once worked at the Horizon Foundation myself. Terrific, terrific place to work. Okay, I hope everyone got a lot out of what Carrie had to say, and thank you, Carrie, for that presentation. So I'm now going to introduce Tara Hall. Tara is the media advocacy manager for Voices for Healthy Kids, a group that we work with a lot at Horizon, at American Heart Association, certainly Sugar Free Kids Maryland. And Tara is going to go a little bit into the messaging and storytelling, but get a little bit more specific about what we're talking about in this specific community and with this specific campaign. And Tara, I will hand it over to you at this point.
Thanks, Andy, and thanks everyone for joining tonight. I'm going to move through it quickly. Number one, I speak kind of fast, but also I know we're running a little bit behind. So if there's a slide that you want more explanation on, snap a picture of it, email me at the end, and I'm happy to go over it with you over phone or Zoom. Next slide, Andy. So we all know companies use marketing tactics to get us to buy what they want. What's different about the tobacco industry is that theirs are outright predatory. And here's one of the big reasons we're against it. Every individual should have an equal opportunity to live a healthy life, and big tobacco continually impedes this. We see it again and again and again. Tobacco industry marketing strategies, you can hear my child in the background, I apologize, have led to disparities in tobacco use. So what I'm about to tell you will probably not come as a surprise, but we see higher use of tobacco rates among people with lower incomes, Black Americans, American Indians, young people, and the LGBTQ individuals. Next slide. All of that means that preemption really does hurt community, but it specifically hurts communities of color. So a couple of stats that are important for you to know that you could take with you when you're going in to talk to lawmakers or the media, right? And so firstly, according to reports out of Ohio, Missouri, and Alabama, where the lawmakers are majority white, what we've seen is that the most negative effects of preemption have been felt in urban areas that are predominantly Black. This just goes to show preemption is not only anti-democratic, it also has some troubling racial overtones attached to it. Now, the Maryland State Conference of NAACP views preemption as a tool that, when used by politicians, disempowers and disproportionately hurts communities of color as well as immigrants. Next slide. So here's a little proof for you. I actually decided to test this myself. I live in South LA, formerly known as South Central LA, predominantly Black, also Latino neighborhood. Researchers in DC found that stores in predominantly Black neighborhoods were up to 10 times more likely to display tobacco ads inside and outside of their stores than in neighborhoods with fewer Black residents. So what I did is I walked out my door right around the corner and snapped 2 pictures. This is right along my running route that I run with my 2-year-old, who you just heard screaming in the background. So he sees these ads every single day. I probably don't need to tell any of you who might live in a predominantly community of color that this exists. Now, I snap the pictures because this is a great time for you to look around your community, see what you're seeing, or if you don't live in a predominantly community of color, drive to one, see what is out there as far as those predatory marketing. Snap a picture, get a video, or if you've got a Zoom call with a lawmaker, go to that location and let that be part of your storytelling. We heard Carrie talk about the importance of compelling storytelling, bringing people, letting them feel what you feel, see what you're seeing. This is a great way to do that. Grab a couple snapshots and draft your narrative. Mine would be, I run this route probably 4 or 5 times a week. My 2-year-old son sees tobacco ad after tobacco ad. Why is that okay? When other children in, maybe higher income neighborhoods aren't seeing that kind of thing, right? So Carrie talks a little bit about the elements that go into making a story. So let's go to the next slide and we'll review them quickly. So we talked problem, solution, action, vision, and I also want to add urgency. And the urgency is important because that is the why now piece. We all know lawmakers get a ton of stuff coming across their desk. Why do they care about tobacco preemption now? We'll go into that in just a second, but already, get those gears turning as to why you think lawmakers should care about that now and not table it until next session. So what I want to do is walk you through a scenario that if maybe I were going to go talk to a lawmaker, what would my message be? What would my story be? So Andy, let's go to the next slide. And here's something that, I might want to say. I might pop in that lawmaker's office, show them those photos that I showed you about the tobacco ads. And then I might say, Senator John Doe, good ideas start locally right here in Baltimore. State governments can set a minimum standard for health, but local governments are uniquely positioned to meet the needs of their communities. But in some cases, we're seeing that local legislators can't pass their own laws because corporate lobbyists have convinced state lawmakers to block them. Next slide. So here's my solution. Cities and counties should be able to pass the laws proven to promote good health, well-being, and equity for their own residents. Next slide. And so what I'm asking for you to do is to support us in our work so that communities can be able to regulate tobacco locally. Next slide. And you're probably asking yourself, I know you get, dozens of people in here every single day trying to talk to you about why their issues matter. Here's why this matters. Now more than ever, communities must have the power to craft and implement their own solutions to challenges presented at attempts to contain COVID-19. People who smoke are more likely than people who don't to develop severe complications with COVID-19. Then it goes into talking a little bit about e-cigarettes and the use of tobacco. You can pull all of these numbers easily online. I pulled these from, you guys remember Truth? I'm sure they still air commercials, but I remember it from when I was a teenager, seeing those Truth commercials was really impactful. So I got all of these stats from Truth. I'm sure you can find them there or at your health department, but these numbers are huge. Next slide. Something else that will help you is to visit the websites or the social media of tobacco companies to see those predatory marketing tactics for yourself. It is unbelievable how low they will go. So this is an ad that I pulled right after COVID-19 started. They were leveraging this e-cigarette company was leveraging the COVID-19 pandemic to get more people to use their products. If you read this, and I'm going to get really close because I can't really see it, but it says, compared with cigarettes, hashtag vapes are 95% less harmful to the hashtag lungs. During hashtag COVID-19 pandemic, we recommend using Modi to alternate cigarettes for your hashtag health. And then they go in, they give you a discount and 2 COVID-19 masks. So this just goes to show you, they really have no bar. The bar is on the ground, right? And so showing this to lawmakers and just showing how predatory these marketing tactics are and that they need to be reeled in is the proof for you, right? The other thing to remember that's really important, you don't want to pit local lawmakers up against state lawmakers. Even if the state lawmakers are a little shady or you feel like, you know, they might be getting some kickbacks, you might want to try avoiding doing that because you want to work with them, right? You want them to see things from your perspective. So a really great way, pit the tobacco industry against everyone else and reveal those shady tactics so lawmakers can see them for themselves. And unless you're looking for it, I mean, like, you know, you follow all kinds of Instagram accounts. Unless you are a user of tobacco products, you probably don't follow the social media, and lawmakers probably don't either, so they aren't even aware this is going on. Drop this truth bomb on them. Andy, you can go to the next slide. So Voices for Healthy Kids has done all kinds of message testing, and these are some of the message testing results that we found when we started looking into preemption. So remember that most people believe government does play a role in their lives. Now, how much of a role, that depends who you're talking to. So make sure you do your research when you're going to talk to people so you can find out where they lie on that spectrum. People have a higher opinion of local government because it's closer to them than they do of other types of government. Most people don't know what preemption is, but once they learn, they generally oppose it. And I'm going to hold that thought in your brains because the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about why that is. People understand consequences. So you want to use stories and bring real examples to life. Like I showed you with the pictures that I shot from around the corner at my house, or that social media post. Bring those stories to life so that way you're painting the picture for the person you're talking to. And remember I said not to pit lawmakers, state versus local. Here's why. You don't want to disparage state government. So when possible, blame industry or those special interest groups. And then finally, just talk about how you want local governments to be able to strengthen the laws that state governments already have when you're talking to those state lawmakers. It lets them know you appreciate the work they're doing. You just want to take it a step further to protect health. Next slide. So a lot of people do not know what preemption is. They also don't know what any of these things are. The average person, and even some lawmakers, aren't going to be really familiar with health disparities. What in the world does that mean? So make sure that when you're talking to them about this kind of inside lingo, that you're either using other words that are maybe a little more user-friendly, or go to the next slide and I'll show you, you can define what you're talking about without making your audience feel like they aren't intelligent. So, you know, you could talk about preemption, but people don't know what it is. So here's an example. You say preemption, which happens to be when a state blocks a community from passing its own laws, hurts our city, and then explain how. Same thing with health disparities or racial equity. As you're talking about those things, just try to throw in the definition. That way they know they're on the same page. They understand what you're talking about. Some other ideas, if you go to the next slide, you can see a neighboring state. Talk about what your neighboring states are doing. Lawmakers like to be the first. They like to be the trailblazer, right? So talk a little bit about what other states are doing and how they can be the first in Maryland to maybe enact that kind of law. So this is something that was pulled out of the Philly Inquirer. Philadelphia is taking the lead in protecting teens from dangerous and unregulated vaping products, right? So, I mean, I'm sure a lot of lawmakers would like to have something like that on their resumes. So Andy, pop to that last slide. That's my contact info. I know this was fire fast, so please feel free to connect with me. That is what I am here for. I'm here to serve as a resource. We can brainstorm. What is your story? How do you find your story? How do you tell your story? Shoot me a text, shoot me an email, and I'll help you shape your story. Maybe do like interview, help you find out what it is, and then we can actually spend some time practicing how you tell that story to a lawmaker. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Tara. That was excellent, very thorough, much appreciated. I'll give everybody a few seconds to write down Tara's email address. She's wonderful to work with. She'll answer your questions right away. There's her phone number as well. I'll give everybody a few seconds and talk about my presentation. I will be building a little bit more on what everybody's talked about already, talking a little bit more about our messaging for this campaign as we go along, as well as other forms of different forms of communication, how you can really get the word out about this campaign as we go along. And let me start this with our messaging. Now, if you remember, Carrie showed you a messaging wheel or messaging box, but this is specific to ours. So, and you don't need to necessarily memorize this right now, but if you email me your email address, I will send you our full box, or I have a whole messaging document that not only has this, the problem, vision, solution, and action, but also a lot of information that supports it, a lot of the statistics that Tara discussed, a lot of information that supports it. And if you read through that, a lot of this will make sense to you. And this is something that if you read and you have a conversation, or if you're talking to someone, a member of the media, it would be very, very helpful for you. So the problem, as Laura mentioned, local governments in Maryland have been stripped of their power to fully protect residents from the devastating effects of tobacco for a lot of reasons. It's prohibiting local governments from responding what causes people to use tobacco in their communities and stifling the progress, reducing use, especially those of young people, and ultimately hurting the health of Maryland's residents. And even though those are the last words, maybe that's the most important words. It is hurting our health, and that is a problem one way or another. What is the vision? And Carrie put this last, I put this second. What we really want is all Maryland residents to have healthy families. Everyone has that right. And we want to ensure the local government has the ability to make that happen, because right now they do not have that. So what's our solution? We're putting together the Maryland Local Tobacco Control Bill, which if you look up on the Maryland's website, they give it a much, much longer name, but we've condensed it to Maryland Local Tobacco Control Bill, because what's it going to do? It's going to authorize localities to enact and enforce local laws regulating the sale and distribution of these cigarettes or tobacco products or smoking devices to fit the needs of their communities. And those are key words too. It's got to fit the needs of the communities. That's what this is all about. So what's our action? We're calling for Larry Hogan, the Maryland General Assembly, to support this bill and allow these state localities to pass their own laws to protect their citizens from the unhealthy results that tobacco products will give you, and improving the health of their citizens. That's the bottom line there. So let's talk a little bit about earned media. People know a lot about earned media as opposed to social media, and what's involved. Radio, television, newspaper, these are outlets that everybody knows something about. There's Baltimore, and what kind of outlets do we have in Maryland? Maryland is a very interesting state because we have two huge media markets. Washington, D.C., one of the top 3 or 4 media markets in the country, and we like to use that to our advantage, and I'll get into that as well. Baltimore, also a very large media market. Annapolis, a very large media market. We've also got small towns throughout Maryland, in Hagerstown, Frederick, Salisbury. They all have their own media markets. And then there's hyper local markets, your own county, your community. Tara has talked about patch.com and Nextdoor. And then there's media outlets for communities of color. We've got several of them in this area. Baltimore Afro-American, BeMoreNews.com, and Washington Informer are ones that you may be familiar with. Maybe you're not, I don't know. But if it affects communities of color, they want to hear about it. Let me go back and talk a little bit more about the outlets before I go on, specifically Washington and Baltimore. Everyone knows the Washington Post, and the Washington Post sets itself apart from the Baltimore Sun or other newspapers in the area, because it is truly a national newspaper. And even though you may not be getting it to your door anymore, you're getting it on the web. People go to the Washington Post, even because Washington, D.C. is such a large market, and because it's such a big international city, people go to the Washington Post for a lot of different reasons. And you know what? They might see something about our campaign because of that they wouldn't see in another newspaper. Baltimore is also very large and it's very important. A lot of people go to that, also very much online. And the same is true with the television stations. Both cities and both markets have TV stations for all 4 major networks. Washington, D.C. is also very close to lots of the national networks. So we try to take advantage of that. And that's true for radio as well. I want to give you some interview tips, and Tara helped me with this. She does a lot of this training, but some of you might be fit for giving interviews to radio, television, newspapers. We want to have as diverse of a group as possible to let everybody know how this is affecting, Joe Smith or Mike Jones, not necessarily the leader of American Heart Association, or not necessarily the leader of local Maryland, or not necessarily the bill sponsor, who we all want to know their opinion, but we also want to know, how is this affecting everybody? How is this affecting Maryland citizens? So all of you are candidates for, if you're interested, and please, that's something else, let me know, shoot me an email. Let me know if you're interested in doing that. We can discuss. How do we prepare? Spend time with me and others to discuss. If I do, I say, hey, Mike or Jane or whoever's on the, whoever I'm speaking to, a reporter from the Washington Times or the Washington Post or the Baltimore Afro-American wants to speak to you, you always have to prepare. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to call them. Okay, what does the reporter want? What does the reporter want? What's the best way to do it? What is my messaging? So that's when you go back to that messaging document that I spoke of. You and I and whoever you trust to help prepare will talk about possible questions they may ask. If you want to take it to another level, go on the internet and plug in the reporter's name and see what reports they've done prior, whether it be in newspaper, radio, or television. It's so easy to find that online now. Ask questions when you're asking questions to the reporter. Feel comfortable to do that. You're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, and you have a right. There are lots of things you have a right to know. Does a reporter have a deadline? What type of story is it? Who else are they talking to? When will this run? Is this live or taped? If it's a video, or if it's a video or audio interview. You usually know that they're calling, but not always. Sometimes, well, for instance, when working for Sugar Free Kids, we had a campaign in Prince George's County last fall, and I had a spokesperson who was terrific. James. And James had a family of 3 children in Prince George's County. He lost a lot of weight because he changed his diet. And because of that, he was very, very supportive of the bill we were trying to pass in Prince George's County. And James was great because he just came off as an every man's type of man. He truly did, a true community person, and he was a terrific spokesperson. Because of that, I used him a lot. And it got to the point where reporters would just see his name and somehow find his phone number and call them, which is a good problem and a bad problem. The great thing is that people are excited to talk to him. Bad thing is people would just call him, just find his phone number or shoot him an email. And James was great. He would always reach out to me first and say, how can we prepare for that? What to wear. And this has changed just recently because of COVID. Very rarely do you have live TV interviews. Mostly you do it just like this through Zoom. That doesn't mean that that's not going to change in 6 months or a year or whatever, but generally you dress professionally. Men wear a tie, women dress professionally, and usually you know what that is. Wear solid colors, simple accessories, no white or stripes. That is very, very important because television with stripes does not work very well. I organized interviews for a gentleman who gave a bunch in New York a few years ago. I know him very well. I woke up and we were walking over to the interviews in New York City, and he was wearing a polka dot tie and a striped shirt. And I said, oh no, we can't do this. We can't do this. So we wound up buying a new shirt and a new tie because he was giving 30 interviews that day. It was very difficult. When you're in your home, that's not a problem. Just pick a solid shirt, pick a solid tie, a solid dress, whatever it might be. Don't wear flashy jewelry. It's not, you don't want people to focus on what you're wearing. You want them to focus on your face and what you're saying. Body language. Look at the interviewer, sit tall, smile. Your attention should be on them. Control your hand. And I know I just gave a hand gesture. Avoid shifty eyes. You're talking to them. You're not talking to the camera. People forget that. People think they're talking to the camera. No, if you're on TV, and obviously it's different with Zoom, you're talking to a computer now. But if you're on TV, you're talking to the camera. By time, please know you can always get back to them specifically if this is, a radio call, or if it's a newspaper call, if it's a taped interview, you can always start over. If you're not feeling comfortable, let people know that. If it's a live interview, that's a different story. You're just gonna have to soldier on. And always return to your main message, which Tara and Carrie have already talked about. Make it personal, real people, real stories, relatable. If it, it's got to appeal to everyday Joe that's turning on the news or reading the newspaper. And why should it matter to me? Avoid jargon. Tara talked about that. You don't want to throw out words that nobody knows. And what's the call to action? Okay, great. Here we are. This is the problem. How are we going to fix the problem? What's the email address that you can send this to? What's the website that I can sign the petition to? What's the hearing that I can attend? Opinion pieces. We've, at both Sugar Free Kids Maryland and Local Maryland, we've been very, very successful with opinion pieces. And this goes back to these publications, the Washington Post. When people do have their newspapers delivered, and people can wake up in Paris and see the Washington Post. People can wake up in London and see the Washington Post. And it is a truly national newspaper. Baltimore is also very important as well. And there's hyper local places that can place your op-eds and letter to the editors. We've been very successful. Right here, I have a graphic I was talking about before from 2 years ago that we got 3 county executives from the state of Maryland who were supporting our 15 minimum wage bill as a floor, and for that bill to pass without preemption amendments. And that went very well as it was placed in the Washington Post. The Sun has that as well. Frederick News Post, lots and lots of opportunities to do that. And generally, when people put together an op-ed, for this one, I ghost wrote it, had it approved by county executives, had other people look at it. It's a usually collaborative effort. It's rarely just one person writing it. Letters to the editor is something very similar. Letters to the editor are much shorter than op-eds, and generally those are responses to articles that have already been posted. So if the opposition, and we'll get into that later, what our opposition is, has a piece written in the Baltimore Sun in their favor, we want to monitor that and say, whoa, this is how we feel about it. This is why we're writing a letter to the editor. At that point, we may reach out to you and say, hey, let's work with this together. And at the very end, we want you to make sure that these are words that you would say and would come out of your mouth. We'll sign it, Joe Schmo, Bowie, Maryland, concerned resident. And sometimes those get printed and sometimes they haven't. I will say this, we have a very good track record of these things being printed or posted to the web. It is not guaranteed. It is never, ever guaranteed, but we do have good connections there. Social media. If you checked out Robin Williams' background, she has this graphic right here. our friends at American Heart Association and Hatcher Public Relations have put together some great graphics, some great sample social media posts. And what those are tweets and Facebook posts that you can literally paste and put into your own Twitter account, your own Facebook page, and then you can pop this fun graphic or a couple others. And I've already created a first batch. And again, if you email me right now or when this is over, I'd be happy to send you this or the messaging document or any of these other things. These work very well. All of our partners have them already. Like I said, Robin was already showing that. I'd love to share them with you. They look very much like this. You know, this one has hashtag COVID-19, which elevates the post quite a bit and talk about how that has an effect on your health and how this bill can fix it. Our hashtag is hashtag local saves lives MD. The hashtag MDGA is Maryland General Assembly 2021. Lots more people will see it with the hashtag. So any tweet that we send out has local saves lives Maryland, local saves lives Maryland MD. Simple, easy, put it at the end of Twitter, your tweet, I should say. If anybody has questions about how to use Twitter or Facebook, again, email me. I'd love to chat with you about it. Word of mouth. So we can talk about media and op-eds and tweets and all that all we want. But word of mouth is a form of communication people forget about and is really the most important and really how everyone here can help us the most. We want everybody to learn what this messaging is, learn what this campaign is all about. Go back to your chapters, go back to your neighbors, your family members. I know that's difficult to do when it's COVID and snowing outside, but we're all communicating all the time, one way or another, texting, phone calls, or in person, your community groups, your faith groups, other networks and connections. That's really what it all boils down to. And explain why this is important to us, why this is important to our community, why this is important to you as an individual or a Marylander or a resident of Prince George's County or Montgomery County or Baltimore City or whatever it may be, and explain how you can take action. Word of mouth might be the most important form of communication we have. And here's a fun picture we have when we were chatting with our group at the Anne Arundel chapter of NAACP. Jackie, President Alsup is there. We did that about a year ago with the Anne Arundel chapter. Back in the days when we could do that and not have to worry about COVID. So long ago. I want to talk about our press conference. We are, as Robin mentioned earlier, we're introducing this legislation at noon on Thursday, February 11th, which is literally 10 days from right now. The press conference I'm going to put together will be available by Zoom, just like this. It'll be about 30 to 40 minutes. We'd love for you to join us. We're obviously inviting the media. We'll have several speakers. We'd love to have you join us. The more support we have, just like in person on Zoom, the better off we are. It's great to, for the media to see how much support there is. And it's a heck of a lot easier in getting up and driving to wherever this may be. We're going to record it, we'll send it out, and we're very, very excited about it. It's going to be at 12 noon with the bill to be introduced at 1 o'clock. So we feel like there'll be a whole lot of momentum to be involved that way, and we're very, very excited about that. Also, do you have contacts of your own? Some of you, I know Willie and I talked, he has some of his contacts in Baltimore, wherever they may be. I've reached out to them. Some of you might have your own contacts. Please let me know, or please let them know. And feel free, again, there's my email address again, akraus@medchi.org. Please email, let me know. And maybe the two of us can work together on getting a piece in whatever that may be, whether it be newspaper, social media, radio, whatever it may be. We'd love to use your contacts. We're a team. And again, here's my number, my phone number, my email address. I'm happy to work with you. I'm happy to talk as much as possible. I think that'd be a lot of fun. I'm now going to move on to Harold Lloyd. Harold is a recent graduate of Frostburg State University. He is now involved with the Anne Arundel chapter of the NAACP. Very impressive guy. He also is the president of Black Excel and Superior Future, his own nonprofit group. And he's going to talk about how important the youth voices are to this campaign.
How's it going, everyone? As Mr. Andy just said, yeah, my name is Harold Molloy. I pretty much have been advocating for the youth very aggressively since the summer when the Black Lives Matter protests hit a peak. And one of the things that I've noticed is that the youth weren't involved in the legislative process enough. A lot of young adults are unaware of the state laws, our state legislator, how our state state legislators work, how they pass bills, et cetera, et cetera. And I wanted to make it, a moral obligation, a moral responsibility for the youth to be involved by giving written oral testimony, not only just protesting, but spreading the message, propagating it through the state, through their counties and through their cities as well, because I truly believe that that will strengthen the movement. And once we bridge our disconnect between the older and the younger generation, especially when we're talking about issues that affect both of us, I feel as though we will be 10 times more powerful and we'll be able to make concrete progression for our communities, especially the underrepresented and underserved communities who are getting oppressed and exploited because they have no voice. And many of our leaders, our elected officials, make stances saying that they are trying to better the future, make sure that the youth will be coming up in a great environment. And when their legislation and there isn't matching with the agenda that they ran off, it is up to the youth and also the older generation to step up and be advocates and call our elected officials out and to make sure that our elected officials aren't overstepping their boundaries and overusing their powers. And that's why this particular situation is so essential, because we have an issue where the state believes that Maryland is monolithic when we truly aren't. Anne Arundel County, the county that I reside in, is nothing like Prince George's County. It's nothing like Baltimore City. And it's a reason why our counties and these cities have their own elected officials, because their elected officials are making laws, passing legislation to benefit the constituents of that county, because the benefits are, because the constituents are going through different issues. What I go through here in Annapolis is not the same as what a kid may go through in Baltimore City. For example, liquor stores and gas stations promoting tobacco, they aren't on every corner here. But when I go to places like Baltimore City and in some areas in PG County, they're more prevalent. And that creates a mindset in some of the kids' minds, which we are seeing the pattern when a lot of kids are indulging in using tobacco or using the vape at a very young age, and they have easy access to it, and it's affecting certain communities in a stronger manner than it's affecting other communities. And the communities that are getting affected are minority communities. And I believe that is why a lot of elected officials turn a blind eye to this. And that is why a lot of elected officials allow big tobacco to come over top of this particular situation and influence our state lawmakers and the state Supreme Court to step in Prince George's County and reverse their ruling, even though those elected officials were trying to protect their community as much as possible, because they know that their community were facing disparities and were getting affected harder than any other community. So that's pretty much all I have to say, and why um, I concur with this particular situation and our stance on this, because if the state keeps stepping in, we will start to see a different type of power, and it will be affecting constituents in ways that we truly not explain, because we're moving as one when our state truly isn't one, and that is the reason why we're separated into regions and counties. Thank you. Oh yeah, so here's my contact information. phone number and email if anybody wants to reach out.
Thank you very much, Harold. Very much appreciate it. We're really looking forward to having you as a spokesperson. It's the importance of having young people as part of our campaign is huge, specifically because that really is a huge focus of the population that is purchasing tobacco-related products and cigarettes, and having Harold on our side is terrific. He really is a terrific spokesperson. We're looking forward to using Harold, or not, I hate to say using Harold, working with Harold very, very soon. He will be part of that press conference. So I just want to wrap it up and say thank you right now as we transition into our question and answer period and discussion. All of our panelists are still here. If anybody has any questions, please let me make this. Here we go. If anybody has any questions for anybody on the panel now, now's the time to ask. We sure? Is there anybody specifically that would like to get involved in one way or another? I know a couple people shot their emails. We will record this. Please let me know, shoot me an email, put it in the chat box. If you'd like a recording, I will definitely share this with Willie, with Robin, with Tracy, and they'll try to get that recording out. I'll make it into a YouTube. This has been really good. Last chance, anybody interested in questions for the panel here? Okay, well, thank you all for joining, and we really appreciate it, and we'll let you enjoy your Monday night. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Great job, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank Robin.
Thank you all. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Robin.
Thank you. Andy, how did it go? Well,
It went well. Hold on. I thought it went very well. I thought the presentation went well. Despite the tick at the beginning, I think we transitioned very well.
okay. Looked like you had quite a few people on tonight, so we got to figure out a way how everyone can get these slides, and we definitely recorded it, right? I know I recorded. I don't know how well it went.
The presentation went very well. I thought it was very, very nice.
Now, Jackie, how can you maneuver two meetings like that? I had to listen more on the other meeting.
I know.